First drone crossed into our sensor envelope at 0314, and I watched it on passive, the way watch something that doesn't know you're awake. We had been running silent for 11 days. No active emissions, no drive signature, no tight beam. From outside, the Ardent shore looked like a wreck. A heavy cruiser with dead engines, tumbling on a slow drift through the call, the lightless corridor of open void between the veth-soral transit lanes. That was what the captain wanted them to see. That was the whole point of 11 days, with no coffee heating, no full spectrum lighting, no anything that pushed a photon past the hull we hadn't accounted for. I was at my station. My display ran on the absolute minimum draw the board could sustain. I had been reading the sensor return on that first drone for 6 minutes before, keyed the captain's private line and said quietly, "Contact, bearing 274. Classification veth-soral Concord. Survey pattern, single unit." Commander Rail's voice came back flat. "Understood. Log it. Hold condition." I logged it. I held condition. I watched the drone complete its first arc around us and begin its second. By 034, there were 9 of them. The veth-soral Concord does not operate the way organic civilizations do. There is no fleet admiral weighing options in a command chair, no political council meeting in emergency session. The Concord is a collective intelligence, distributed, networked, running on probability mass the way a river runs on gradient. When it assigns 9 survey drones to circle a derelict, it is not curious. It has already reached a conclusion. The drones are confirmation of what it already knows. It already knew we were dead. I found that out later from the intercepts our signals team had been quietly announcing in the dark. The Concord's internal assessment, reconstructed from its own data pulse traffic. Hull class confirmed Terran heavy cruiser, pre-conflict registry, drive output 0, power signature consistent with catastrophic systems failure, threat probability 0.03, recommended action, board, catalog, cover any navigational data of value, log the wreck coordinates for future traffic hazard notation, threat probability 0.003. I sat with that number for a long time after it was all over. The Concorde is precise about its numbers. It doesn't assign 0.03 carelessly. It means the model has run, the data has been weighed, and the conclusion is as close to certainty as a machine collective ever declares. They weren't guessing we were dead. They were certain of it. At 0407, the first boarding unit docked at our secondary airlock. I know the exact time, because I had been watching the approach on thermals, and I wrote it in the margin of my log in pencil. Old habit from my first posting. So I'd have it somewhere the system couldn't touch. There were 12 of them. The veth-soral Concorde's boarding units are not soldiers in any sense a human military officer would recognize. They are ambulatory sensor platforms, flee humanoid in chassis, with no analog for self-preservation instinct. They do not get frightened. They do not get cautious. They move through a space the way a measurement moves through a calculation. Efficiently, indifferently, following the most probable path to the desired result. They spread out through our lower decks in a grid pattern. On my board I could track all 12 of them by the faint thermal bleed of their chassis against our cold decks. I watched them work their way through the engineering compartments, the secondary cargo spaces, the maintenance corridors. Systematic, unhurried. A machine intelligence cataloging what it had already decided was wreckage. The captain let them get 40 meters in. "Voss," she said, over the command channel, just the one word. My name. I reached across my board and keyed the sequence I had been prepped to key for 11 days. The Ardent shore woke up. Not gradually, not in stages. Every system came up in the same 2-second window. Drives, sensors, weapons, point defense, internal lighting, life support to full. Every comm array and every targeting solution running simultaneously. 0 emissions to full combat readiness in the time it takes to say it. The hull went from the thermal signature of a dead rock to a ship that was, by every measurable metric, already in the fight. I watched what happened to the Concorde's data pulse traffic in real time on my intercept display. And I want to be precise about this. It didn't spike. It fragmented. The Concorde's probability models work on continuous input. The stream of sensor data that feeds the collectives. Assessment function never stops, never stutters. Because in 11 years of operating in this region, it has never encountered a reason for it to. A dead ship does not become a live one. That is not a thing that happens. The Concorde had no architecture for handling a data stream that said, in the space of 2 seconds, that a 0.003 threat probability had just become something it did not have a number for. The fragmentation lasted 4 seconds. Then the collective's reassessment pulse went out. I could see it propagate across their network. Cascading update, moving outward at the speed the Concorde's internal traffic runs. I didn't have the translation for most of it in real time. What I had was the shape of it. Every prior assumption about this corridor, this wreck, this region, flagged for revision. The boarding units stopped moving. All 12 of them simultaneously, in whatever compartment or corridor they had reached. 40 meters of Ardent shore real estate, and every Concorde unit in it went still. Our weapons officer had targeting solutions on the 9 survey drones outside, and the boarding unit docking craft within 4 seconds of the wake. The captain did not fire. She opened a channel on the Concorde's known hailing frequency and said, calmly, "This is Commander Adisa Rail, Terran Heavy Cruiser Ardent Shore. Your assessment was incorrect. I am asking your boarding units to withdraw now. That was it. No ultimatum, threat, no inventory of what we could do to them if they chose otherwise. Just the statement and the ask, and the implied weight of a ship that had just demonstrated the difference between silent and dead." The Concorde took 49 seconds to respond. I timed it. 49 seconds is an eternity for a machine intelligence. It is long enough for the collective to run the new data, remodel every assumption, and reach a new probability mass. What came back on the channel was not words. The Concorde does not use words in the way we do, not in its own internal traffic. What came back was a data pulse that our translation suite rendered as assessment revised, withdrawing. The boarding units moved back through our lower decks in the grid pattern they'd used coming in. Orderly. No wasted motion. They redocked, detached, and the docking craft pulled away from our hull at standard egress speed. Not fast, not panicked, just the clean, precise movement of a system executing a revised instruction. The 9 survey drones held position for another 6 minutes and 12 seconds. Then they turned, and they left. I kept watching them on passive until they crossed out of sensor range. Force of habit. The same habit that had kept me at a minimum draw board for 11 days, without going to sleep more than 4 hours at a stretch, watching the call for exactly this for the moment. When something that thought it knew what we were got close enough to find out otherwise. Commander Rail came off the command channel and walked the length of the bridge. She stopped at my station. "Good work, Voss." I didn't say anything brilliant, I said. "Thank you, ma'am." She nodded and went back to her chair. That was the debrief. I have thought about those 49 seconds many times since. The Concorde is not given to uncertainty. It is constitutionally incapable of it, in the way a calculation is incapable of doubt. But for 49 seconds, something in the Concorde's architecture had to rebuild itself from the ground up, because the model it had been operating on, the model that said a silent ship was a dead ship, had just been proven wrong in 2 seconds flat by 11 days of patience. We hadn't fired a shot. We hadn't moved an inch until the moment we chose to. We had simply been there, fully present, fully capable, waiting in the dark, for someone to come close enough to learn the difference. The Concorde put out a revised navigational hazard notice on its traffic network within the hour. I saw it in the next day's signals summary. The notice reclassified the call drift from an uncontested corridor to a region of uncertain strategic status, pending further assessment. 11 days of silence, and we had redrawn the map without burning a gram of ordnance. I wrote that down in pencil too, on the same page as the boarding time. I wanted it somewhere the system couldn't touch, in case anyone ever asked me what the Ardent Shore had done out there in the dark. The answer was nothing, really. The answer was that we had simply refused to be what they assumed we were. It turned out that was enough.